Hello and welcome to Camp Kindergarten, Math and Science. My name is Sarah Scoggin and I'm the Early Childhood Librarian at Newburgh Free Library. I'll put a link up in the card to our previous Camp Kindergarten videos, and I'll put a link down in the description to Read Squared, the summer reading digital platform. If you'd like to earn a digital badge, you can sign up or sign in and tell us what activity this video inspired you to do. So let's get started. Mathematical thinking and scientific thinking absolutely can be taught starting really early on without overwhelming little ones with tons of facts and lists and concepts that they're really not developmentally ready to absorb. So if you were going to try to teach science facts, you can use something that's called memory statements. That's one type of educational philosophy uses those. So the educator Erin Elizabeth Cox recommends using a memory statement like tadpoles turn into frogs. So you repeat that statement and then you give it some kind of context, like say that and then you read a book about frogs, or you sing songs about frogs, or both, or you go get a frog or see a frog if you can. Just something to give it a context, and so you're just exposing them to scientific fact and letting their toddler sponge-like brains just absorb and remember those facts by exposure and repetition, rather than like quizzing them or giving them worksheets or things that they really won't be able to learn very well from. But how do you teach science concepts, even the bigger, more foundational concepts or mathematical concepts? There is a website that I think is great for explaining this. It's actually from HeadStart. It is the HeadStart Interactive Early Learning Framework. And I'll put a link to that in the description. I mentioned it in my first Camp Kindergarten program. And so you can click not just on math and science, but on all different subjects, and it breaks it down. Here's the concept in math or science. Here are the skills that show that the child has that concept. So let's give some examples. For mathematics, the concept could be, well, counting, of course, counting up, counting down, but also something like recognizing the value of a set. And by that, I mean, you can have 5 dots, or that you can have the number 5, or I could say the word 5, and to make the connection between when I say 5 or you see this symbol, that this is the set that we mean. It could be 5 of anything. It doesn't matter what we're counting. It's still 5, and it doesn't matter how they're arranged. It's still 5. It's still a set of 5. So that concept. Also understanding that one number is more than another. So you could practice. You could have just dots, 2 dots versus 6 dots. You could build towers of blocks with 2 blocks and 6, and then you could say, well, which number is bigger, 2 or 6? And once they've seen the visual, a lot of times practicing which is bigger, and they can just see which one is bigger, then without any props, you could say, well, which one's bigger, 6 or 2? And say, oh, 6 is bigger. The tower of 6 blocks is bigger than the tower of 2 blocks. Another thing is using math vocabulary. So words like longer, shorter, the name of a shape, eventually how many sides does a shape have, not just it's a rectangle, but it has 4 sides. Knowing that 0 equals none, those kind of vocab words. Understanding ratios, and for that it would be something like this block tower is twice as big as this one over here. Or if I have a measuring cup, here's a whole cup and a half cup was half the size of this one. So that's ratio words. There's also another great PreK tool for understanding skills and concepts to teach your little ones. And that is actually from the New York State. So it's the New York State PreK learning document. I'll link to that in the description as well. And they mention a math concept called connecting counting to cardinality. And by that, they simply mean if I have something, I could count them. I could just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but I could also say this is the first dot, this is the second dot, this is the third dot. So it's connecting 1 with first or 2 with second, connecting those 2 ideas together. So that's counting versus cardinality. For science concepts, and it's going back to the HeadStart interactive tool, some of the main science concepts are observation. So a child understanding that to observe something means to use his or her senses to find out more about an object. What does it look like? What does it sound like? Does it smell like anything? What does it feel like? So the word observe. Another concept is to be able to ask a scientific question. So they could just ask, why is the sky blue? Because they're curious, and that's good. But it's even better if they ask a question that's, I wonder what will happen if. A question that will let them make a prediction. That's actually the next skill, is to be able to make a prediction. So if they dropped a ball and then they dropped a piece of paper and they noticed that the paper kind of flutters down slowly and the ball just fell, then they say, oh, I wonder what would happen if I dropped something else. Then that you can help them get their prediction. What do you think will happen? To be able to do the experiment. Experiment is one of their vocabulary words in a list. And then say, oh, I learned something. I did my experiment, and am I right or am I wrong? Another thing is logical thinking. Just taking the steps to these ideas all fit together logically. Be able to recognize when something fits together. And also categorizing objects and phenomena. Just a fancy way of saying, can they sort things? Can they organize things in their mind or in front of them? So to know that something, an object like a snowflake, and a phenomenon like wind, something happening, could all be part of weather. So rainbows, rain, sun, all these different things are part of weather. And we'll talk more about sorting in the activities. So actually, let's just get right to those activities. Activities. Activity 1, everybody count. So to try to come up with creative ways of counting. Start over on the left there, the counting race game from Frugal Fun for Boys, where you use cars to count the number of squares. And instructions will be in the link. The next is counting with salad fixings. If you go to the Scholastic site down in the description, it will show you how to make a salad number line and other extensions you can do with salad fixings with little ones, so you can get your healthy salad made and counting. And last we have cupcake wrapper counting from Laughing Kids Learn. You could use pom-poms or anything to be the counters for putting things in cupcake paper or in the well of a muffin tin with a piece of tape, something to tell the kids how many of those tokens should you put in each cup. Activity 2, patterns. So patterns are a great mathematical concept to work on, and they are all around. There are lots of free printable games you could do for patterning, like over in the corner there, Jack and the Beanstalk, free printable pattern pieces. Or if you have any little toys, like counting bears or elephants or something, stuffed animals, something you could use to make a pattern. But you absolutely do not have to buy something or even necessarily find something to make patterns. You could look at a flower and see the pattern of a petal up high and a petal down low, petal up high, petal down low. You could look at the weather. You could write down it was sunny today, then the next day it was rainy, and then it's sunny again. That's a pattern. You could just look at trees. You could find a green tree, an orange tree, a green tree in the fall. Or it could have been a maple tree, a pine tree, a maple tree. That's a natural pattern. Even a barcode is a pattern of thick lines and thin lines and blank spaces. So you can just use the barcode on anything in your house. Once you start thinking about patterns, they're everywhere. Activity 3, shape hunt. So kids start out by learning the different names of the shapes, but once they've kind of got that down, you can start to see if you can find shapes just in the world around you. So it could be the triangle on the top of a house. It could be an oval on a ring. It could be an octagon on a stop sign. It could be a square, lots of squares that you could find in a window with other squares in it. So just to look around your house or around where you live to see different shapes. Activity 4, fun made to measure. So measuring skills are great things to work on. If you have some measuring spoons and cups or pitchers, and toddlers tend to love to scoop things, you could use rice or beans or anything like that, or if you want to use them in bathtubs, so it doesn't matter if they're spilling water as they pour. And as I mentioned earlier, you can talk about something as half or twice as much or even a quarter, or just let them see. So, okay, how many of these smallest cups do you need to fill up the biggest cup? Oh, you need 4, so it's 1/4. You need 4, just to expose them to that concept. Or you can measure other things besides volume. You can measure height, and you could use something besides inches or centimeters if you wanted to get started with something like how many snap together blocks. Tall are you? Or how tall is your favorite toy in blocks? Or anything else that you want to use to be the unit of measurement. How many Cheerios long is the spoon? Just to get them interested. So, oh, I can count it up and figure out how many of these units of measurement long is something. Activity 5, sorted. Sorting is another great mathematical skill, and you could use little plastic animals if you have them. Those are great. You could sort them by where the animals live, by what they eat. Do they have scales? Do they have fur? What color are they? Let's say you had an animal like a bird that had 2 feet and a snake that had 0 feet. You could put that with 4-footed animals and sort them by feet. Really, you can come up with a whole list of different ways to sort animals. You can even just pick a whole bunch of random objects and see if you can come up with ways to sort them. That's a really great brain stretcher to see, well, what do these things have in common that I could put these 2 in a group over here, say, and these 3 in another group, that there are all different ways to sort things. It's not only one way you could sort them. You could use playing cards, you sort them just by, are they black or red? You could sort them by suit, you could sort them by number, all different ways. You could make patterns by putting down red and black cards. You could sort the food you're eating into fruits and vegetables. In the corner there is a actual sorting set by the Curious Neuron. I'll link to that site. And there's little shapes there in the shape of people. There's also shapes that are hearts and then stars. So you can see they're sorted there by what kind of shape they are, not by color, or you could sort everything by color. Activity 6, sink or float. I personally think that the sink or float activity is a perfect first experiment, or at least first experiment to do sort of formally, to say we're going to try to figure out, we're going to make a prediction. We call that a hypothesis, what you think is going to happen. Will something float or will it sink? And you can even have the little ones hunt around the house for waterproof things that they want to test, whether they would sink or float. And you can even have them help you write down or draw pictures or make a check mark or something, what things they think are going to float or which things they think are going to sink. So it's a great sort of example experiment. But there's also a great article on the HeadStart website called Beyond Sink or Float. So to start with something like this and then take it to the next level. And the article is written for teachers, but it can also apply to parents and caregivers who are teaching their little ones science. And this is Dr. Schaus, Anthony Schaus, the director of the Institute for Science and Math Education from the University of Washington. And he said to keep in mind that science is an open-ended and social activity that allows kids to ask questions and explore the natural world. That is it. An open investigative process, not merely a body of knowledge, but more of a framework, a way of looking at the world. Activity 7, Oobleck Dino Swamp or Dino Eggs. So this is a fun activity to do if you have some cornstarch. So Oobleck is just a mixture of cornstarch and water, roughly half and half. And it's what we call a non-Newtonian fluid. And that just means if you sort of punch the Oobleck or you hit it quickly, hard, it will resist your hand almost like a solid. Or if you try to pick up a chunk of it and grab it really hard, it will be like a solid. But then when it doesn't have force being put on it, it's a liquid. So you might hit it with your fist and it's like your hand bounces off. But if you lower your hand slowly into the Oobleck, it'll just go right in like a liquid. And if you have little dinos, you can pretend that's the dino swamp and you have to rescue the dinosaurs. And you can talk about dinosaur species, or you can just have fun playing with Oobleck and comparing that to if you mixed water and flour, say, or water and salt, how it's different than what the Oobleck feels like. You can also take baking soda and water, or various kinds of clay. But I find that baking soda and water works really well for making dino eggs. So if you have little plastic dinosaurs, you just get a big handful of damp baking soda, just enough that you can kind of mold it like clay around the dinosaur, let them dry for a good long while, and they form into kind of hard dino eggs. And then your little ones can have fun slowly excavating the dinosaurs out of their eggs. Activity 8, Mini Museum. So I've done this activity a number of times when I was doing science programs at the library. And this is just to gather together as many sort of interesting items as you can. Things that are safe for the little ones to really touch, explore, engage with. And then they tell you what they observe. So you can say, what do you observe about these rocks or these feathers or a pig made of cast iron or whatever interesting objects you can find. You could use moss, pine cones. It really can be anything. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I mean, if you have a neat fossil, of course you could include it, but it could just be anything that you can find. And that just gives them an open-ended opportunity to kind of see the wonder in these ordinary things, because this is their museum, and to really focus on them, to stop and think about them. That's maybe even a good exercise for adults, to just look at something simple like a whisk and think about it, which normally you don't even pay it a second thought. So that's all I have for you today for Camp Kindergarten Math and Science. We hope you join us again next time. Thank you so much for watching.